Okay, well,
I'm not ruling.
I don't think
listen, I'm not ruled by cognitive
then.
dissonance. I'm okay with like my view changing. So if you can offer me something that deepens my perspective, I'm absolutely like, I'm not like, no, I'm just going to argue this for the sake of it.
Do you object to value calls and value judgments when it comes to dating?
What do you mean? Like in regard?
Well, I mean, do you object to a guy who would not want to date a woman who's overweight, for example?
No, I think you can have whatever standard you want. And I actually agree with the standard about like men or women.
Your friend's fucking dying in the bathroom.
Not what?
I'm kidding. She's like dying. Never mind. Go ahead.
No, I think it's like one thing that I see argued on here a lot is that they like you guys will say it's fair for a guy not to want a woman that has a high body count. And I haven't really seen any good argument against that. And I actually agree with you guys.
Let me help you with that.
No, I agree that it's fine to not want to be with someone who has a high body count for multiple reasons.
But wait, let's go back to supply and demand. Do you think that men would prefer, just on average, to have a woman with a low body count or a high body count?
I don't think that men care as much as
no. So let's say for a second that we took you and made a perfect clone of you. Like, let's say, I don't know, you had a twin sister or something like this, but however it was that your thought waves and brain patterns were mapped completely onto another woman, which is an exact doppelganger of you. Okay, and a man could choose. He fell in love with you. And the clone of you had slept with no people, and you had slept with 100 people, and it's the same person. Which one do you think the man would choose?
I think a large portion would want the girl who knows what the fuck she's doing.
That part.
Hold on.
Erroneous! Erroneous!
So do you think that they would prefer the promiscuous you?
Yes, this is a topic that's actually debated online a lot.
Well, then what you should do is just look at the camera then and say that you're going to fuck a ton of dudes because you think it's going to raise your value to men.
Well, I don't give a fuck what anybody views my value as. I don't have a high body count, and I don't want to down-regulate my fucking oxytocin receptors by sleeping with a bunch of people aimlessly.
Yeah, wait, but wouldn't people love you more if you did?
Some guys do prefer women who know what they're doing. They don't want to have to train somebody. Some men are possessive and like want someone to themselves, and I think that's also fair. And one argument that women have against that is like, oh, men only don't want a girl with a high body count because they're insecure. Even if that is the case, like, who cares? Like, they're allowed to feel insecure.
I don't know. It seems to me that the value of virgins, since there's so few of them in society, has skyrocketed in the dating marketplace, and that men are competing over them a lot more than they're competing over women who are highly promiscuous.
Has this been studied? Is this like,
actually, yes.
If a guy's a virgin, to me, it's a turn off.
On the preferences of body count.
That's disgusting. If a guy's a
let me answer
virgin.
a question.
Men and women aren't
Can we
the same.
switch this around?
We can, but just let us finish our argument. We're almost done. So, there has been study for preferences for high or low body count, and men tend to prefer lower body count. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's true. And they do tend to compete a lot more over women who are virgins. They tend to compete a lot more for them. So it seems that based on supply and demand, there's a lot fewer virgins. So the supply of them is down. The demand for them is up.
Okay.
Right.
But
so they can de-virgin them. That's why.
What percentage?
Like, I want a virgin so I can take her virginity.
What percentage of women that are conventionally attractive are going to remain virgins up until the point of marriage?
Very few.
Very few. Right. Yeah. So then that brings in the predicament of reality versus idealism, which is ideally very attractive women.
Their round meatball donated $200. Dating marketplace is obviously different than a market for goods. If you want a more complete partner, some level of exploration is necessary.
Which is
Virgin is bad, but so is promiscuity.
Virgin is bad.
Totally agree.
I don't think.
Disagree.
I don't think virgin.
Disavow.
No, every single marketplace. She's a psychologist. She should know this, right? Every single marketplace in economics also runs off of psychology. It also runs off of consumer trust. It runs off of how people feel about the product. Successful marketing campaigns tug at heartstrings, has nothing to do with the product at all. So no, all
what are these studies and like how recently were they done?
What's that?
How recent are these studies?
I have them. Nick, can you get those pulled up, please? There's like multiple studies, both of them, please.
What's the background on the studies? Were they just random men that they picked up off the street?
Well, I mean, to be fair, we could like pick apart any study.
No, many of these have had a meta-analysis. There have been a meta-analysis done on
There's-
these studies. I mean, that's
Did men?
the,
Did they
Scroll
do
up.
it for women too? Like, did they ask women what they
Scroll
thought
up,
about men that were
scroll up.
virgins?
Okay, but this is
I would
not
love
what we're
to see
talking
that.
about.
well, no,
Hold on.
yes,
Hold on.
actually, we do have some studies on
Hold on.
that too. It seemed
So-
to be less important to women than it did
Hold
to
on,
men.
Nick, a little less zoomed in, please. Okay, scroll down just a bit. So there was a study in 2023 re-examining the link. Hold on, re-examining the link between premarital sex and divorce. Scroll down. There was one in this other one, sowing wild oats, valuable experience or field full of weeds, personal relationships, and some, I don't know. There's another one from 2018, fewer sex partners means a happier marriage. There's 2018 from Wolfinger, Promiscuous America, smart, secular, and somewhat less happy.
Yeah, but this,
There's
we agree on this,
1974,
though.
premarital sexual behavior.
but that's
and
not the
postmarital
topic. The
adjustment.
topic is, do men, where are the studies that specifically say that men
Men
prefer women with less body counts as
Show
opposed
the next
to
tab,
not?
Nick. The next one.
And I don't discredit that you could be right. I just haven't seen
There's a
any data
whole
about
bunch
it.
of
Because
Well,
those
then
were
I guess
not
if
good
I wanted
examples
to
of
be with a
that.
guy that
promiscuity and
wanted a virgin,
infidelity.
I could just
Still
say
not
I'm
the
a
topic.
virgin.
Have
Well,
they
if there's
given
a
27
correlations?
2017.
Okay,
You're not
so
gonna love me
listen,
if I'm not a
I
virgin.
can
2005.
I can agree with all of this. By the way, I am highly aware of the neuroscience behind why having a bunch of sex partners is not good for you. It essentially down regulates your fucking oxytocin receptors, and for men, dopamine. Well, both women and men, but more so with men, the vasopressin and the dopamine. So it's not good. If you want someone who can actually emotionally connect, you're going to find that person less likely, because what
You're
happens
talking
is
about pair bonding.
you create like a neural imprint. And
Then why earlier did you just say that most men would prefer women with
no,
high
no, I'm
body
not saying
counts?
most.
They're
I'm
less
just
likely
saying
to be
I
able
don't
to
know
pair
that it's
bond.
the case that men care. Like, I've heard and I've seen on online debates, a lot of men say they would prefer to be with someone who knows what they're doing, who has a little more experience.
I think those
I-
men are probably just
personally-
trying to sleep with
I
you.
personally think it's having a high body count is not ideal. Like, for me, because it's the same
Why not?
issue in men, because I want someone with properly functioning dopamine receptors who's not going to be more prone to risky behavior, and that can actually pair bonds and be monogamous, because that's what I would want out of a partner. Also,
So
it
why
could-
would you make the assumption that
promiscuity
this is
can
not
also
true
ref-
the other direction?
There's
promiscuity can also reflect like mental health issues, not to stigmatize them, but like you have
Right.
higher promiscuity
So
with
it's
like
proxy
BPD
for
and
mental
NPD.
health issues. That's another justification for a man not wanting to date somebody.
Right. I'm not saying that those reasonings don't exist, because I agree.
But you're trying to justify.
No, no,
well,
I'm not trying to
she has a
just-
high body count because of mental health.
No, no, no.
illness.
I think it's fair for someone not to want to be with someone with a high body count, because it could reflect mental health issues, because high promiscuity is associated with things like BPD. And we have millions of years of evolutionary biology coded into our DNA geared towards self-preservation. So it's fair to not want to be with someone who has a high body
You know,
count.
sex isn't this
You're
like.
more
That's
at
interesting
risk
that
for
you bring up
STDs.
evolution.
You're
How would you pre paternity test make a determination on if a child was yours from a man's perspective? How would you do that?
how would what?
Pre-paternity tests, which are recent, from an evolutionary standpoint, how would you as a man be able to make a determination that a child a woman had was yours?
Looks.
What do you? Oh, okay. So
How-
I mean, I guess
How would you
couldn't.
determine that?
You would just look at them and see if they look like you, I suppose.
Well, if they were more chaste, right, they had less promiscuity, then this is a woman who you could count on likely
Yeah.
to actually be bearing your child, right?
Right. So we listen.
So wouldn't that be
we
wired in as a
agree.
preference then, evolutionarily?
It could be, but I think the dating market is vastly different because of second wave feminism leading to hookup
Wait,
culture
just to
and
be
shit.
clear. So when
I'm-
when was second wave feminism?
I don't know the fucking dates.
Within the past century?
Yes.
Do you think that the evolutionary basis that Andrew's arguing about has been undone in the course of less than 100 years?
Definitely.
To some extent, yes,
No,
absolutely.
You don't. That's not how.
Okay, make a poll then.
That's not how evolution.
Make a poll. Make a poll. Let's ask the
What?
guests. No, listen, I agree with you guys on this. I'm just saying you can't say that all men, or even the
Oh my-
majority of
we're
men
not.
prefer.
Yes,
We're not putting anything in a
You
monolith.
are saying the majority
Yes,
of men
I
prefer
would
it.
say the majority of men
Yeah.
prefer.
And you could be right, but how? Like, where are you drawing this conclusion?
Let me ask you a question. If you look up into the sky,
Mhm.
and I say that the sky is blue, do I need a study to prove that the sky
What
is blue?
in the false equivalence is that shit?
It's. God. So you want a study that indicates that
No, I'm
men
just-
have been surveyed How about this?
If you're gonna-
if I ask my chat,
Well, the
if I were to ask
burden
my
of proof is
chat-
on you. So if you're making these points, then yes, you should show a study, not in regards to divorce or any of the other shit that you just pulled up. But if you're going to say men prefer women who don't know what the fuck they're doing, I'm just saying, like, you can look online and see men talk
Do you
about
think
this all the
that
time.
Dude, so let's dive into this real quick then. Let's find out, and we'll test your logic and see if that's true. You're requesting empirical data as the burden of evidence for whether or not this can be demonstrated to you, which I think is fair. But what if we could logically demonstrate it for you? That's also another way in which a thing can be demonstrated to a person that does not require empiricism, correct?
It depends on the topic. You can't I don't think you can apply that to any argument stance.
Well,
you're gonna
I mean,
speak on behalf of
empiricism,
other men, it needs to be
empiricism,
studied,
hang on,
their opinion
empiricism
specifically.
itself is just a foundational ethos of I believe X. So, like, you would have to justify why we should even use empiricism. But that aside,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, hang on, you would. But I'm just going to grant that maybe we could, as long as you'll grant that I could also logically demonstrate something to you as well. Because you'd have to logically demonstrate why we should use empirical data. I'm just going to grant that we should. But if I can logically demonstrate for you, for instance, that most of the world is religious, most of the world is religious, not some. And most of the religions of the world have some kind of virtue ethic when it comes to sex. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, then there must be some preference for promiscuity
Does that mean they uphold
being
it,
bad
though?
from
Does
the
that mean that they
position of
uphold
both
it?
men and women.
I mean, you could also argue that someone who is promiscuous is probably more fertile. You could really dive into that on all
That does
kinds of
not
levels.
contend with my argument that I just gave you at
Okay,
all.
but
So
that would be
most
to
of the world
assume
is
that
religious,
right, but that
and
would be-
most religions. Stop. Let me make the argument again,
Okay.
and then steelman the argument before you respond to it.
Okay.
The argument is, if most of the world is religious, most religions have a sexual ethic which is against promiscuity, which they do. Then it seems that people must have some preference against sexual promiscuity. That would be a sound conclusion. Can you steelman the argument first and then give me an argument counter to it?
I think what you're saying is valid, but I think that not everyone who's religious upholds religious values by far. By far.
There
We would
are
not have-
outliers.
That's a non sequitur.
married.
What's the argument?
The argument is that until there's actual data saying what men prefer, then all of this is just hypothetical bullshit.
It can't be hypothetical. We have empirical data on religion. We
When was
know
religion formed?
empirically that most of the world is religious.
Right.
We
When
know
was
that
religion formed?
empirically.
When was religion formed? You have to take into context society at the time that it was formed.
Why do we have to do that
we
for
don't
when we're
because we don't
talking
live in
about
that climate
modernity?
anymore. We don't live
Wait,
in that
why
climate
would-
anymore.
That's no. That's literally, that's a genetic fallacy. What are you talking about? That's a fallacious form of argumentation.
People who
Why
created
would we
the religion,
have to go to when a religion was formed to make a determination that right this second, most of society is religious? In most societies of the world have some kind of religion they adhere to with sexual ethics which are against promiscuity. Therefore, there must be some preference against promiscuity, unless you can give me a counter argument to that.
I'm not saying that there's not a preference. I'm saying, and most of the people that would be in favor of women who are more experienced are not going to be religious to begin with. So
That-
you're
That's
adding
still
all
not an
these
argument.
variables.
That's not a counter
They're kind of
argument.
cucks, to be honest.
I mean, I don't
That's not a
disagree.
counter argument. Like, what's the counter argument to it? Some people might not be religious. I know. I'm granting that. That's
Right,
baked
but you're
right?
trying to
We're
add in a
saying
bunch
most
of
of the
variables
world.
that may not be applicable in today's society. I don't know very many people who have said things along the lines of I prefer a woman who's more experienced that are religious.
Most of the people in the world do not live in Western societies. Most do not.
Okay,
They
so
live
are we
all-
having a world
yeah,
debate
so
or an
we're talking
American
about we're
culture
talking
debate?
about Muslims, and we're talking about Jews, and we're talking about
Okay.
Christians, and we're talking about all sorts of different religions which exist. There's almost in all of them an ethic against sexual promiscuity. Almost
If
all
we're
of them.
if we're talking about
There
the
must
whole
be
world, then
some
yeah, that's
preference
absolutely
then
fair.
against promiscuity, right?
Yeah, if we're talking worldwide, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So you,
Well, I mean, you don't think that human beings evolve. You don't think that men, the ontological nature of what is a man in a Muslim nation is different than the ontological nature of a man here, right? I mean, they're the same. They're both men.
I think
so.
there's-
Why would they have a preference there?
There's okay.
Distinct from a preference here. For all of us who are religious, seem to have this preference, and most people are religious.
There's multiple factors that go into a person's decision making, and religion is not the only thing. There are social aspects, generational aspects, and are you arguing that what things are like in Egypt right now are similar to America? Are you saying the culture?
No, there's going to be a cultural. Of course, there's going to be
Okay,
cultural
exactly. So
distinctions
then-
between them, but
so
the
then the-
religions can be uniform even absent culture. So